Empty hallways, dark windows. Silence hung heavy in the house. Mark was alone. His family, a distant memory of laughter and warmth, had left for their annual ski trip. He stayed. Finals had drained him. All he craved was solitude, rest, and the quiet comfort of his childhood home. He didn't know he was walking into a nightmare. The first 2 days were ordinary. He slept, ate, and worked his way through a mountain of unread novels. The silence was his companion, a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. But on the third day the silence shifted. It became thick, expectant, like the air before a storm. Night fell, casting a blanket of darkness over the world. The streets were empty, devoid of life, and the only sound was the distant howl of the wind. Shadows crept across the walls like living things, shifting and dancing in the dim light. They seemed to have a life of their own, moving with an eerie grace. Mark sat by the fireplace, a book lying forgotten in his lap. He had tried to read, to lose himself in the pages, but the words had blurred together, meaningless. The silence was broken by the crackling fire, each pop and hiss amplified in the stillness. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows on the walls. He felt it then, a prickle on the back of his neck. It was a sensation that sent a shiver down his spine, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. A coldness that had nothing to do with the winter wind howling outside. It was a deeper chill, one that seemed to seep into his very bones. He looked over his shoulder, into the darkness of the hallway. The shadows seemed to deepen, and the silence grew heavier, more oppressive. Nothing. Just the wind, he muttered, trying to convince himself. But the words felt empty, a hollow reassurance that did nothing to ease his growing unease. He strained his ears, listening for any sound that might break the silence, but there was nothing. Just the wind and the crackling fire. But his words felt hollow, lost in the oppressive silence. The quiet seemed to press in on him, a tangible force that made it hard to breathe. His unease grew, spreading through him like a virus. It was a creeping dread, a sense that something was terribly wrong. The once comforting solitude of the house now felt suffocating, a weight pressing down on his chest. He felt trapped, isolated in the silence. Mark's mind raced, conjuring images of unseen horrors lurking in the shadows. He knew it was irrational, but the fear was real, palpable. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The silence was maddening, each second stretching into an eternity. He needed to do something, anything to break the spell. Slowly, he stood up, the book slipping from his lap and landing on the floor with a soft thud. The sound was startling in the quiet, a sudden intrusion that made his heart race. He moved towards the hallway, each step hesitant, his eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to watch him. The silence followed him, a constant companion, as he ventured deeper into the darkness. A sound, barely audible, cut through the silence. A soft tap. He froze, holding his breath. It came again. A knock, slow, deliberate, coming from the front door. He listened, every sense on high alert. His heart pounded against his ribs. Mark crept towards the door, each step measured and silent. The hallway stretched before him, a black abyss that seemed to stretch on forever. The air grew colder, the scent of damp earth filling his nostrils. He reached the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. He took a deep breath and threw open the door. Empty. The porch light cast stark shadows on the empty porch. The night was still, almost unnaturally so, as if the world was holding its breath. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a sense of foreboding that seemed to seep into the very walls of the house. The wind howled, rattling the bare branches of the old oak tree in the yard. Each gust seemed to carry whispers, unintelligible but undeniably there, as if the wind itself was trying to communicate some ancient secret. The tree stood like a sentinel, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. He scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. His eyes strained against the inky blackness, every shadow a potential threat. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling and the distant call of a night bird. Nothing. He closed the door, leaning against the wood, his heart still racing. The solid barrier offered little comfort, as if it could barely keep out the unknown that lurked just beyond. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one a reminder of his vulnerability. He tried to rationalize. A branch maybe, or perhaps just his imagination running wild. He had always been a logical man, but tonight logic seemed to falter in the face of the inexplicable. His mind raced, grasping for any reasonable explanation, or an animal, but deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. Something wasn't right. The feeling gnawed at him, an insistent whisper that refused to be silenced. He couldn't shake the sensation that he was not alone, that unseen eyes were watching his every move. Back in the living room, he tried to shake off the unease. The familiar surroundings offered little solace, each shadow seeming to harbor hidden threats. He sank into his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, but comfort eluded him. He stoked the fire, trying to chase away the chill that had settled in his bones. The flames danced and flickered, casting a warm glow, but the warmth felt superficial, unable to penetrate the cold dread that had taken root inside him. But the silence was different now. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, filled with an unspoken tension. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside seemed amplified, each sound a potential harbinger of something sinister. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something else. A presence. Watching. Waiting. The air seemed to thicken, each breath a struggle, as if the very atmosphere was charged with an unseen energy. He could feel it, a palpable force, lurking just beyond the edge of perception, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Section 5. The hallway. The knock came again the next night. It was louder this time, more insistent, as if demanding to be heard. The sound echoed through the stillness of the night, sending shivers down his spine. This time there was no mistaking it. 3 sharp raps. Each knock seemed to reverberate through the walls, amplifying the sense of dread that had settled over him. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that it wasn't a branch or an animal this time. The knocks were too deliberate, too human. His mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. He didn't bother with the front door. The thought of opening it and facing whatever was on the other side was too much to bear. Instead, he turned his attention to the hallway. Instead, he stood at the entrance of the hallway, his heart pounding against his ribs like a drum. The hallway stretched out before him, a tunnel of darkness that seemed to go on forever. The hallway was dark, the shadows deeper than before. It felt as if the darkness was alive, shifting and moving just beyond the reach of the dim light. He strained his eyes, trying to pierce the gloom. Every nerve in his body was on edge, his senses heightened by the fear that gripped him. He thought he saw it then, a faint shadow, barely perceptible, moving at the edge of his vision. His breath caught in his throat as he tried to focus on the elusive figure. A flicker of movement at the far end of the hall. It was quick, almost too quick to be real, but he knew he had seen something. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he had witnessed. A shadow, taller than a man, standing at the edge of the light. It loomed there, silent and menacing, its presence filling him with an overwhelming sense of dread. He blinked, and it was gone. The hallway was empty once more, but the fear remained, gnawing at him. He knew that whatever it was, it would be back. And next time, he might not be so lucky. Section 6. Closer. The knocking continued each night, relentless, insistent. Each time he would stand in the hallway, his fear a living thing within him, and each time he would catch a glimpse of the shadow. Closer now. He felt its presence now, a cold, suffocating weight that followed him from room to room. He wasn't alone. He knew that now. He wasn't alone in the house. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind against the windows, sent a jolt of fear through him. He was trapped in a nightmare, the once familiar house now a prison of his own fear. Section 7. Trapped. One night he couldn't take it anymore. The knocking came again, Louder this time, more insistent. The shadow was closer now, just at the edge of his vision. He couldn't breathe, he had to see it, he had to know. Mark took a step into the hallway, then another. He walked slowly, each step heavy with dread. The air grew colder, the smell of damp earth overwhelming. He felt a presence now, close enough to touch. His hand shook as he reached out, his fingers brushing against something cold and damp. He recoiled, his heart pounding in his chest. He was in too deep. There was no turning back. Section 8. The Message. He followed the wall, his hand trailing along the cold plaster. He stopped, his fingers brushing against something rough, etched into the wall. He felt for his phone, his fingers fumbling in the dark. The light flickered on, illuminating the message scratched into the wall. It was a single word, scrawled in what looked like blood. Help! The word hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken terror. He wasn't imagining it, he wasn't going crazy. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. Section 9. The Face. He spun around, his blood turning to ice. Standing there, at the end of the hallway, bathed in the pale moonlight streaming through the window, was a figure. Tall and gaunt, its face hidden in the shadows. It took a step closer, and another, its eyes burning into him. He could feel its breath on his face now, cold and rancid. And then, it moved into the light. It was his face, his own face, twisted into an expression of pure, unadulterated terror.